Hi everybody, welcome back, and if you're new, welcome. My name is Gabby, and if you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do, I cover true crime cases, and all the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older, so if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe down below, click the subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. So as many of you already know, this month of January, I'm going to be covering just cases that had huge updates last year of 2024. I recently came across today's case and I definitely wanted to include it in this month's theme because it involves a recent arrest and a case that is believed to be the oldest person arrested in British history in relation to a cold case murder. There's not a whole lot of information with this one, but I wanted to include it anyway because a family may be getting some much needed peace after over 5 decades. Before I get into the case, I do have to mention that all recent articles online spell the victim's name Louisa with an A at the end. When I went to newspapers.com to look through some original newspaper articles on this case, I typed that in and I couldn't find anything. So I decided to try an E at the end of her name instead of an A, and I was met with dozens of articles. I'm going to assume her name is pronounced Louisa, and most current news outlets figured it was just an A instead of an E, and that spelling spread in recent time. With all of that being said though, this is the case of Louise Dunne. Louisa Jane Dunne lived in Easton, an inner city area of the city of Bristol in the United Kingdom. She was a 75-year-old woman who mostly kept to herself. Sources claim she was either born in 1891 or 1892. Ms. Dunne had sadly been widowed twice. Her first husband was a Labour city councillor named Teddy Parker, who was working his way up to potentially becoming mayor at the time of his death. As stated by the Western Daily Press, he represented St. Paul's ward. He was an ex-docker who had organized and led unemployment marches in the city in the 1930s. He died during wartime, leaving behind 2 grown married daughters named Edna and Iris. Louisa's second husband was an Irish night watchman named John Dunne, who also unfortunately passed away 7 years before this case takes place. It seems that after Teddy passed away, she became extremely depressed, and it really took a while for her to even think about love again after losing someone she loved so dearly. Then she finally married again and was yet again left alone as a result of their passing, which was heartbreaking to her. After John died, she became, as many articles claim, a recluse. She lived a solitary life and didn't see many friends or family like she had in years prior. Children in the neighborhood would call her Granny or the Old Witch because of the black clothing she wore on the regular. She stuck to her usual routine and preferred the solace of solitude over the company of others. That doesn't mean though that she didn't see anyone. She did have some close, friendly neighbors she would meet up with on occasion. One of those neighbors was 79-year-old Alice Clark. Alice was one of Louisa's best friends at the time. At the time of Louisa's death, she was living on the bottom floor of 58 Britannia Road in Easton. Alice would tell the Bristol Evening Post that they had been friends for many years and that Louisa always spoke of the past, rarely the present, that she wasn't the type of woman to tell you her business. Alice said that Louisa definitely let herself go and stopped caring much about herself since the death of her second husband. Alice stated that most of their visits were quite short, but the last time she saw Louisa, the visit lasted longer than usual. In late June of 1967, Louisa arrived at Alice's home on Bloy Street at about 5:15 p.m. Bloy is about 1 street south from Britannia, so it was a very short walk. The two shared custard and stewed gooseberries. They talked and laughed. Then Louisa headed home at around 7:30 p.m. As Louisa left, she told her friend Alice, "Good night, God bless, I don't know when I'll be seeing thee," which is something she would usually say when departing Alice's home. Those, though, were the last words Alice would ever hear her dear friend say. A couple of days later, on Wednesday, the 28th of June, a neighbor, Mrs. V. Allen, decided to go check on Louisa because no one in the neighborhood had seen her in a day or so. When she got to Louisa's home, she noticed the front window of the house was left open. This was strange to her because Louisa was conscious of her security. This was known by everyone. She would have never just left a window open. The neighbor decided to peek inside, but couldn't see past the curtains. She went to the mail slot and yelled for Louisa, but no one answered. She decided to crawl through the window that had been left open, and when she got inside, she saw Louisa lying on the floor. At first, she thought her friend had had a stroke and fallen, but she had a little bit of blood on her face, which was obviously alarming. Police were called to the scene immediately, and Louisa was found lying on the floor in the front room of her home wearing a black velvet coat and a black shawl. She had obvious strangulation marks on her neck. Her cause of death was recorded as strangulation and asphyxiation. She had also been raped. As a result of the discovery that Louisa had been murdered, Detective Superintendent Hicks set up a murder headquarters at Eastville Police Station. This group of investigators working on the case were referred to as the Murder Squad in most newspapers at the time. It was believed that the person who took her life had broken into her home between the hours of 11:30 p.m. of the 27th and 4 a.m. of the 28th, but they couldn't be 100% sure of this. The strange thing is that there were no signs of an actual struggle inside of her home. Nothing had been knocked over. It didn't seem like she had really had the strength to fight off her attacker, which is obviously heartbreaking. It also didn't seem like anything had been taken, but they did believe robbery may have been the motive, considering many of her handbags were found open in the back room. Authorities found no money in the handbags, but that may have been because Louisa didn't really have much money. They were informed that welfare visitors called her weekly. It seemed like she may have overall been struggling financially at the time of her death, and that her only main source of income was her pension, which wasn't a whole lot. The front window had been left open, but so had the back door and a window in the back of the home. Authorities asked neighbors if they had heard anything the night that it was believed she had been murdered. One neighbor claimed they had heard screaming, but were uncertain what time it may have been. Based on a newspaper article by the Evening Post released on June 29th, there was a rumor authorities had heard that some believed that Louisa had a secret stash of money somewhere in her home, that is possibly why someone would have wanted to rob her. No stash was ever found though, and it didn't seem like her killer had located it based on the fact that the home was not in disarray. This stash of money was overall believed to be nothing but a rumor that possibly cost Louisa Dunne her life. It is believed that possibly the killer came in to rob poor Louisa. She tried to stop him, then he took the opportunity to sexually assault her and ultimately took her life. Authorities though did have to ask the question, did this elderly woman who lived alone possibly have any enemies? Well, as the Western Daily Press said, she didn't have many close friends, but she didn't have any enemies. She was known to have a bit of a temper, but no one knew of anyone she had angered enough to target her in this way. Although Louisa's friends had stated she had been more shut off from society since the passing of her second husband, she was still very well known in her area. People knew her as the woman you would see often wearing her black shawl and walking to and from the local shops. Based on who her first husband was, Teddy Parker, it's not unbelievable for one to imagine that somebody who knew of Louisa but didn't necessarily know her life too well would think that she did have money. But she didn't though. Louisa's case spread not only around England, but worldwide. Police asked the public for help and followed every lead that came in, but none of them got them any closer to solving Louisa's murder. Authorities wanted to see if anyone in the area had seen anything suspicious near Louisa's home around the time they believed she had been murdered. One girl did come forward claiming that she got out of a taxi on her way home from a party around 2:10 a.m. that Wednesday morning of the 28th when she saw a man about 200 yards from Louise's home. She described him as being about 35 years of age, standing between 5 feet 7 inches and 5 feet 8 inches tall, had a medium build, and she noticed he had very large hands. She said he was wearing a button-down dark brown suede 3/4 length coat and dark colored trousers. Unfortunately, she didn't get a very good look at his face, so she wasn't able to sit down with a police sketch artist and help create a sketch of what he looked like. Authorities were asking the public to come forward if anyone knew who this man was, and they wanted to know if any taxi drivers had possibly picked up a man in the area that fit this unknown man's description sometime during Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. Unfortunately, these efforts proved fruitless. At this time, authorities had given this unknown killer the title of the Easton Strangler. Authorities, though, as they checked her home for clues, came across a handprint near one of the open windows. They wanted to find whose hand the print belonged to, so they began collecting prints from men in Easton, all between the ages of 16 to 60. There was a team of about 8 people checking and rechecking handprints for up to an average of 15 hours a day. At the time, there was a stack of over 5,000 prints to go through. They spent weeks comparing the prints to the one that they had from Louise's home, and none of them were matching up. The process of comparing handprints, especially back before computer databases, was tedious and time-consuming. Each person's handprint has a unique structure. They had to compare the lines, ridges, creases of the prints, see if there were any distinguishing characteristics like a possible scar or a recent cut. If there were fingerprints along with the palm, then of course they would have had to compare the fingerprints as well. Detective Chief Inspector Frederick Cross was quoted saying, "We are getting 100% cooperation from the public for this difficult job. People have been coming into the station and volunteering their prints and ringing us up to tell us when they will be home." While prints were continuously being collected and checked and rechecked, officers were driving around the streets of Easton picking up anyone they deemed suspicious, even just people that were homeless, and they would take them in for questioning to see if they had any information to give forth. One detective stated, "We found them sleeping in the countryside, empty houses, and parks. They got a free meal afterwards." The entirety of this case, police in total had interviewed roughly 8,000 people and took roughly 30,000 statements. Louise's case, though, ran cold within a few years. By the very early 1970s, there were almost no tips coming into the police. When a case goes cold, it means that despite efforts to solve the crime, the investigation has stalled, and the chances of solving it diminish over time. They weren't identifying any suspects, no one's handprint was matching up to the one they had on file, and technology just wasn't advanced enough to be looking at the case from the point of testing DNA. In high-profile cases, public interest can sometimes push law enforcement to keep investigating. However, when media attention fades and the public moves on, investigations most often lose momentum. As the years go by, the case may be forgotten by the public and new detectives may not prioritize it. It wasn't until 2023 when new officers wanted to take a second look at this case. 2023 was 56 years after her murder. In 2023, the case was reopened officially, involving a re-examination of the forensic evidence, which involved DNA. A lot of information regarding the updates in this case are currently being kept private from the public to prevent anything tampering with the investigation. What has been stated publicly, though, is that DNA testing has found the person they believe to be the person who took Louise's life 57 years ago. Avon and Somerset police said the charge comes after they began reviewing the case in 2023, prompting further forensic examination of some items. On the morning of Tuesday, the 19th of November, 2024, 92-year-old Ryland Headley of Clarence Road in Ipswich was arrested in connection with the killing of Louise Dunne. Avon and Somerset police said he was charged overnight and appeared at Bristol Magistrates Court on Wednesday via video chat. Headley was accompanied by his solicitor. He was not asked to enter pleas to the 2 charges against him. The only time he spoke was to verify his name, date of birth, his address, and that he was fully aware that the hearing was taking place, as if he was actually physically present in court. District Judge Lynn Matthews told the defendant, "There are 2 charges which are alleged against you. The first is that between the 26th and 29th of June 1967 in Easton, Bristol, you murdered Louise Dunne. The second allegation is that between the same dates in Bristol, you raped Louise Dunne, a woman. The 2 matters are going to be sent to the Crown Court. A hearing at Bristol Crown Court will be tomorrow at or about 10 a.m. I have no power to consider the question of your bail, and therefore you'll be remanded in custody until tomorrow." Headley did not attend the brief hearing at Bristol Crown Court the next morning, where Judge Martin Picton set a trial date of June 16th of this year. Headley's trial will take place before a High Court judge at Bristol Crown Court, and it is expected to last up to 3 weeks. According to the BBC, a plea and trial preparation hearing is fixed for the 14th of February. No application for bail was made. Detective Inspector Dave Marchant of Avon and Somerset Police said after the charging of Headley, "This is an extremely significant moment in an appalling and distressing case which has remained unsolved for almost 6 decades. We've identified and spoken to Louise Dunne's next of kin to update them on this development, and specialist family liaison officers will now be supporting them to keep them updated on the progress of our investigation, but also to ensure they get access to any specialist support they may need." He went on to say, "We recognize this will also come as a shock to the community in Easton. While this tragic incident happened a long time ago, there will be people who remember what happened and may have had a connection with Louisa through family or friends. As this investigation is at a critical phase and to protect the integrity of any future criminal proceedings, we won't be able to confirm the full details, but we are absolutely committed to continue carrying out a thorough investigation to try and bring Louisa's relatives the answers they've waited a lifetime for." ITV News noted that the case is believed to be the oldest cold case murder arrest in British history. I did try to do a little bit of digging online and see if I could find an arrest in a cold case of anyone older than 92 in general anywhere in the world, and I personally could not find anything. I know there have been arrests of people older for crimes, but in relation to a cold case, I couldn't find one. If you know of one, definitely let me know in the comments. Of course, this case still has to go through with a trial in a few months, so it is not considered solved as of right now, but I'm curious to see the final conclusion and all of the evidence presented in court in June. According to Sky News, the police department stated that this is the first time in its history an arrest has been made nearly 60 years after the crime took place. They also stated that the murder of Louise Dunne is the oldest cold case on their records. So her case has been sitting there the longest at their department, waiting for some resolution, which I really do hope there will be a full resolution for this case in a few months. Louisa has been gone for 57 years, but her family deserves to know justice was finally served in her case. Ryland Headley would have been in his mid-30s in mid-1967. Had he committed this crime, could he have been the one the girl making her way home from the party saw near Louisa's home during Wednesday morning? That very well could be the case, and I feel like we might find that out during the trial. As this case finally reaches its resolution, we can only hope that the outcome brings some measure of peace and closure to the family who has endured years of uncertainty and heartache. Though no legal outcome can truly erase the pain of such a loss, may this step towards justice offer them a sense of solace and healing. In the end, the pursuit of truth and accountability is not just for the victim, but also those left behind. And we stand with them in the hope that they can now begin to find the peace they so rightfully deserve. I want to thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day to hear about Louise Dunne's case, and of course, this incredible and hopefully life-changing update that we have in it after almost 60 years. I will, of course, keep you all updated when it comes to the final verdict in her case. If there are any cases that you possibly want me to cover here on my channel, make sure to send those over to gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day wherever you are. Stay safe like always, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.